The waiting room of America's Got Talent buzzed with nervous energy, a whirlwind of hopeful faces, crumpled sheet music, and last-minute rehearsals. Contestants paced back and forth, muttering lyrics under their breath, testing vocal runs, or stretching their limbs as if stretching could loosen the knot of anxiety in their stomachs. Cameras flashed here and there as production assistants hustled past, clipboard in hand, calling names and guiding performers to the stage. The air smelled faintly of perfume, coffee, and the unmistakable tension of anticipation, the kind that makes hearts thump loud enough to feel in the throat. Among the chaos, Ethan stood quietly in a corner, his guitar case leaning against his worn sneakers. Unlike many of the other hopefuls, he didn't pace. He didn't talk nervously to a friend or practice loudly in front of the mirrors. He simply stood, taking deep, steady breaths, eyes scanning the room, but not in a way that betrayed worry. There was a calm about him, something subtle yet magnetic, as if he carried a quiet certainty that went beyond talent or technique. His clothes were simple, jeans frayed at the edges, a faded blue t-shirt, and a hoodie that had seen better days. A few contestants glanced at him, some with smirks, others with mild curiosity. "You're seriously going up there with that?" whispered a tall contestant polishing his electric guitar, a hint of mockery in his tone. "An Elvis song? Really? This isn't the 60s? Ethan didn't respond. He only offered a small smile, polite but not apologetic. His focus wasn't on impressing anyone in the room. It was elsewhere, somewhere deeper, where fear and hope met and mingled, where the purpose of his performance mattered more than the judges' opinions. The assistant called his name. Ethan shouldered his guitar case, feeling the familiar weight of it against his back, the leather strap soft and worn. Every scratch and dent on the instrument told a story. Nights spent practicing alone, melodies played quietly in hospital corridors, songs sung in small cafes for tips barely covering a meal. This guitar had been his companion through hope and hardship alike. And now it was carrying him onto one of the world's biggest stages. As he stepped into the waiting hallway that led to the audition stage, he saw the judges for the first time, 3 faces of authority, poised behind their desks, pens poised, eyes sharp. Simon, Heidi, and Howie, each with their own brand of scrutiny, their gaze trained to dissect talent in seconds. They had seen thousands of hopefuls, countless voices and acts, each promising to be the one. But Ethan felt no fear. Only a calm determination and a quiet excitement for what was about to happen. The assistant opened the stage door, and Ethan stepped into the spotlight. The lights hit him first, and for a moment he squinted against the brightness, feeling the sudden warmth and gravity of the moment. The room seemed larger than life, the stage stretching out before him, cameras pointed from every angle, an audience of strangers watching silently, waiting. Some whispered, some fidgeted in their seats. A few rolled their eyes when they saw him. "And what's your name?" Simon's voice cut through the hush, skeptical and sharp. "Ethan," he replied softly, his voice carrying enough confidence to be heard clearly. "And I'll be singing an Elvis song." A ripple of quiet laughter spread through the audience, barely audible but unmistakable. Some judges exchanged glances. Heidi raised an eyebrow. Howie leaned back, smirking. Elvis on act in 2026. It sounded outdated to them, almost quaint. Ethan smiled again, and this time there was something more, a warmth, a reassurance, as if he were sharing a secret rather than performing for judgment. He set his guitar on his chest, fingers poised over the strings, and closed his eyes for a brief second. In that moment the room seemed to hold its breath. He opened his eyes and strummed the first chord. It wasn't flashy, it wasn't loud, it wasn't meant to be, but it was honest. The sound was crisp and clear, resonating with the subtle depth of someone who had played not just for applause, but for hearts in need. The room grew quieter. Some audience members leaned forward, sensing something different about him. The others, still skeptical, waited for the performance to unfold, their curiosity piqued despite themselves. Ethan took a slow breath and began to sing. The first notes of the song were soft, almost tender, but there was a rawness to them that demanded attention. It wasn't just skill, it was vulnerability laid bare, a story being told without words. The lyrics, though familiar, carried a new weight in his voice, infused with emotion only life experience could give. He glanced briefly toward the front row, where a young boy sat with wide, awestruck eyes. There was something about the child that stopped Ethan's heart for a fraction of a second. A small hospital wrist band peeking out from under his sleeve. Ethan's gaze softened. He knew why he was really here. This wasn't just about him winning a competition. It was about bringing a moment of joy, hope, and magic to someone who needed it more than anyone in the room. The boy's eyes met his, and Ethan's confidence deepened. Every note he played now had purpose. Every word he sang carried a heartbeat of intention. The skeptical whispers in the audience faded. The camera lights glimmered off the polished stage floor, but it was the unspoken connection between performer and listener that held the room in its grip. By the time Ethan finished the first verse, the room had transformed. Judges leaned forward, murmurs replaced by attentive silence. The audience sat still, not wanting to break the spell. Even the assistants backstage paused, captivated by something intangible but profoundly moving. A performance that seemed destined to be ordinary had already begun to feel extraordinary. Ethan strummed the final chord of his intro, and for a heartbeat, the world seemed suspended in that sound. Not a single person moved. The power of music, the honesty of emotion, and the quiet courage of a young man with a worn guitar had claimed the stage, and in that moment no one laughed, no one doubted. Something had shifted. Something important was about to happen. As he prepared to move into the full song, Ethan allowed himself a small smile. He didn't need to impress anyone. The connection was already there, invisible but undeniable, stretching from his heart to the boy in the front row, to the judges, to every single person watching. That one simple truth, the act of sharing, of performing with purpose, was already changing everything. And with that, he lifted his fingers to the strings again, ready to sing not for fame, not for validation, but for something far greater, to give hope, to inspire, and to remind everyone in the room why they fell in love with music in the first place. The stage was set, the moment was Ethan's, and this Elvis performance, simple, honest, heartfelt, was about to change AGT forever. The moment Ethan's fingers brushed across the strings, a subtle transformation rippled through the audition room. It started almost imperceptibly, a slight pause in the background chatter, a gentle shift in the audience's attention. The first note was pure, delicate, yet commanding, like a small flame flickering in a dark room. It was clear that this wasn't going to be another flashy, shallow audition. There was depth here, there was soul. The judges leaned slightly forward in their seats. Simon's signature frown softened, replaced by a flicker of curiosity. Heidi's posture straightened, as if her body knew the room had changed in some subtle, unexplainable way. Howie, who usually had a playful smirk plastered across his face, suddenly quieted. The energy in the room shifted from casual skepticism to focused attention, as if Ethan's first note had pulled them all into a different dimension where music spoke louder than words. Ethan closed his eyes for a moment, letting the sound resonate in the air, feeling the weight of it in his chest. The chord hummed with warmth, carrying years of practice, struggle, and quiet determination. This was not just a song, it was a story of resilience, of small victories, of silent battles fought in hospital corridors, lonely rooms, and cafes that never stayed open late enough for anyone to hear. Each strum of the guitar was a heartbeat, a pulse of life, and the audience, consciously or unconsciously, felt it. He began to sing. The opening notes were soft, almost fragile, yet there was a trembling honesty to them that demanded attention. There was no pretense, no exaggeration, no desperate need to impress. Every word dripped with authenticity. Even the most distracted audience members, scrolling phones or whispering to each other, stopped. They could feel something in the sound they hadn't expected, something that reached past talent and touched the human heart. Ethan's voice carried both a gentle vulnerability and an unshakable strength. It was the voice of someone who had lived, who had seen pain and disappointment, but who still believed in the power of hope and music. It wasn't about perfect notes or flashy technique. It was about connection, an invisible bridge forming between him and everyone in the room. He glanced subtly toward the front row, where the young boy with the hospital wrist sat, eyes wide and shining. The boy's lips quivered as if he were holding back tears, and a small smile broke across his face. For a fleeting moment, Ethan felt the nervousness he had carried for weeks evaporate. This boy, who had faced unimaginable challenges, was watching him, not just watching but listening, not just hearing but feeling. And that was enough. Every ounce of preparation, every hour spent in empty rooms with only the echo of his voice for company, had led to this moment. The camera pans caught every flicker of emotion on the judges' faces. Simon's eyes narrowed, not in suspicion but in awe, as he watched Ethan's voice fill the room with unspoken emotion. Heidi's lips pressed together, and she unconsciously leaned closer to the microphone, eager not to miss a single note. Howie's hand went to his chest, a subtle but unmistakable gesture of being moved. Even the audience, initially skeptical, sat in quiet awe, their previous doubts dissolving like mist under the sun. Ethan moved seamlessly into the second verse, his voice gaining strength, but never losing its gentle sincerity. The lyrics, though familiar, took on a new meaning. Each phrase was layered with empathy, with the lived experiences that had shaped him into this moment. Every glance he cast toward the boy in the front row was filled with a silent promise, "I'm here for you, this song is for you." And then something remarkable happened. The boy, encouraged by the depth of Ethan's performance, began humming along quietly. It wasn't loud, it wasn't perfect, but it was real, it was brave, and the innocence and courage in his small voice tugged at every heart in the room. Ethan, noticing the boy, allowed a subtle smile to creep onto his face, a nod to the young boy that he was sharing this moment with him. The audience sensed this interaction, and suddenly, the room became more than a stage. It became a space of shared humanity. As the chorus approached, Ethan's voice swelled with emotion. Each note he hit was measured, deliberate, and yet somehow spontaneous, as if he were pouring everything he had into the song, trusting that the universe would carry the rest. The guitar resonated beneath his fingers like a heartbeat, steady and unwavering. Judges leaned forward even more, no longer evaluating, but experiencing. The room, once filled with skeptical murmurs, now hummed with quiet anticipation. Everyone present knew something special was unfolding. Ethan paused for a brief moment between verses, letting a single note linger, letting it breathe. In that silence, the power of the performance deepened. The audience exhaled collectively, even without realizing it, as if holding their breath had been a ritual in preparation for this moment. Then he continued, voice rising with the subtle intensity of someone who had seen life's fragility and chosen to celebrate it anyway. The boy in the front row was now softly singing along, encouraged by Ethan's warmth and sincerity. His small voice, tentative but clear, became an echo of Ethan's message, that hope, joy, and courage can exist even in the most challenging circumstances. Ethan's eyes briefly welled with tears, not of sadness, but of gratitude, grateful for the chance to touch a life, to bring light into a space that often feels heavy and dim. By the end of the verse, the room had transformed completely. Skeptics were silent, smirks had faded. Every single person, from the camera operators to the production assistants, from the judges to the audience members, was connected to the music in a way they had not anticipated. This wasn't just a performance, it was an experience, an awakening. Ethan strummed the final chord of the section with precision and heart, letting it ring out long enough to allow the emotion to settle into the room like sunlight filtering through a window. And in that moment, a subtle but undeniable shift occurred. Everyone present recognized that this audition wasn't about winning a competition. It was about touching lives, inspiring courage, and reminding people of the extraordinary power of a single, heartfelt act. He looked once more toward the boy, whose wide eyes were now shimmering with tears. The connection was palpable, unspoken, and eternal. Ethan's heart swelled, not with pride, but with purpose. He knew that this was just the beginning, that the true impact of this performance had yet to unfold. But in that instant, the room had already changed. One honest, brave performance had begun to reach deep into every soul present, setting the stage for something truly transformative. And as he prepared for the next verse, Ethan silently promised himself one thing. He would sing not just with his voice, but with his heart. Every note would carry intention, every word would carry meaning, and every moment would carry hope. Because he wasn't just performing for the judges or the cameras. He was performing for the boy, for the audience, and for every person who had ever felt invisible, overlooked, or unworthy of joy. The first note had been struck, and it had already begun to change everything. The room had grown almost unbearably quiet. Every heartbeat, every small rustle in the audience seemed magnified, suspended in the air alongside Ethan's music. By now, it was no longer just an audition. It was an experience, one that demanded attention and compelled emotion. The first two verses had already captivated the room, but now, as Ethan transitioned into the chorus, something extraordinary began to unfold. Ethan's voice rose with subtle power, carrying both vulnerability and strength. Each word was deliberate yet effortlessly natural, as if the song had been inside him all along, waiting for this exact moment to escape. The judges were leaning forward, no longer evaluating technique or memorized notes, but listening, really listening, with every fiber of their being. Simon's frown had softened into a look of awe. Heidi's hands were clasped tightly in front of her, as if holding herself together. Howie's usual playful demeanor had disappeared entirely. He was utterly absorbed, the raw emotion pulling at his chest. And then Ethan noticed the boy in the front row, the small patient with the hospital wristband. The boy's lips were quivering, tears streaming down his cheeks, but his eyes were fixed on Ethan with unwavering attention. Ethan's own chest tightened. He had never intended to make anyone cry, and yet that was exactly what was happening, but not from sadness. It was awe, it was hope, it was recognition that someone truly cared enough to dedicate this moment to them. Ethan's fingers danced over the guitar strings with precision, yet there was a softness to the touch, a gentleness that mirrored the emotion in his voice. Every chord, every note was filled with intention. He glanced down at his guitar briefly, then back to the boy and gave a subtle nod. That simple gesture spoke volumes. "This is for you," and then it happened. The boy, encouraged by Ethan's unwavering gaze and the emotional depth of the music, began to sing along. His voice was small at first, hesitant, uncertain, but each note was brave, each word a declaration of courage. The audience could feel it, and the judges' faces reflected it. Simon's eyes glistened with tears he didn't bother to hide. Heidi's lips trembled as she whispered softly to herself, overwhelmed. Howie's hand moved to cover his mouth, the emotion too great to contain. Ethan didn't skip a beat. Instead, he wove the boy's voice into the performance, adjusting his tone, his timing, and his energy to encourage the child. It was no longer just a solo performance. It was a duet of humanity, a shared moment of vulnerability and bravery that transcended the competition. The audience in the room began to feel it, too. Whispers of awe and gasps of surprise rippled through the crowd, followed by a stillness that seemed to hold the world at bay. And then came the revelation. As Ethan reached the bridge of the song, his voice filled the room with an intensity that was almost tangible. The camera captured the boy's parents in the front row, tears streaming down their faces, clutching each other tightly. They whispered to one another, "He doesn't know our son, and yet he's singing for him." The weight of that realization struck the audience like a lightning bolt. This was more than a performance, it was an act of pure, unselfish compassion. The judges were visibly shaken. Simon, known for his sharp critique and rarely seen moved, had tears glimmering in his eyes. Heidi's hands pressed over her mouth as she struggled to contain the emotion swelling in her chest. Howie's usual humor was gone, replaced by a quiet reverence. Even the crew behind the cameras were silent, some wiping away tears as they watched the connection unfold live. Ethan's voice cracked slightly, not from fear, but from the overwhelming weight of emotion. He let the note linger, holding it long enough for the room to absorb it fully. The boy's small voice rose in harmony, and suddenly it wasn't just the stage, not just the judges, not just the audience. It was a shared heartbeat. Every soul in the room was connected by this moment, bound together by vulnerability, empathy, and the sheer power of music to touch hearts. And then the unexpected happened. The boy, emboldened by Ethan's encouragement, stepped slightly forward in his seat, singing louder, more confidently. Ethan glanced at him with a gentle smile and nodded approvingly, allowing the child's voice to shine alongside his own. The audience erupted in a wave of applause, not just for talent, but for courage, for humanity, for the way a simple act of selflessness could create something so profound. The crescendo approached. Ethan's voice soared, the guitar chords striking with perfect balance between precision and raw emotion. Every note carried meaning, every phrase conveyed the message, "You matter, your voice matters. Your story matters." The boy's voice harmonized beautifully, blending with Ethan's in a moment that felt suspended outside of time. The judges rose to their feet, unable to contain their emotion any longer. The crowd joined in, some standing, some crying, some clapping softly, as if afraid to break the delicate magic that had formed in the room. As the final notes rang out, the audience and judges were left in a stunned silence. The last chord reverberated like a heartbeat, echoing in every corner of the theater. For a moment no one moved, no one spoke. The magnitude of what had just occurred settled over the room like a warm, gentle wave. The boy's face glowed with uncontainable joy, tears streaming freely now, but this time from pure happiness. Ethan gently strummed the final chord, his own eyes misting, feeling the profound connection that had been forged in these few minutes. Simon was the first to speak, his voice choked but steady. That was something I've never seen before. It wasn't just a performance, it was magic. Heidi nodded, tears glistening. It's moments like this that remind us why we do this show. This is beyond talent. This is humanity. Howie, still holding back his emotions, managed a soft laugh and said, "I'm usually the first to crack jokes, but I can't. That was incredible." The boy's parents rushed onto the stage as the audience erupted into a standing ovation. They hugged their son tightly, tears of relief and gratitude streaming down their faces. Ethan knelt slightly to meet the boy at eye level, shaking his hand gently, and whispered, "You sang beautifully. This was for you." The boy's smile widened, his small hand clutching Ethan's, and the connection was complete. In that moment, the stage wasn't a competition. The judges weren't gatekeepers. The cameras weren't just capturing a show. The audience wasn't just watching. The room had become a sanctuary of human emotion, a place where courage, kindness, and music intersected to create something truly unforgettable. Ethan stood, letting the applause wash over him, but he wasn't thinking about winning or fame. He was thinking about the boy, about the ripple effect of hope and joy that had just begun. One act of selflessness, one choice to dedicate a performance to someone else, had transformed the room, touched countless hearts, and reminded everyone present of the simple, undeniable truth. The most powerful performances are those that come from the heart, not the ego. And so, as the standing ovation continued, Ethan took a deep breath, smiling quietly to himself. He had set out to sing an Elvis song, but in reality, he had done something far greater. He had inspired courage, sparked joy, and reminded everyone present, and watching at home, that kindness and selflessness have the power to stop time, if only for a moment, and leave a lasting mark on the world. The applause was deafening, yet it carried a different weight than the typical fanfare of America's Got Talent. It wasn't just praise for a flawless performance, it was recognition of something deeper, something intangible, courage, selflessness, and the rare kind of artistry that transcends talent and touches the human heart. Ethan's voice had stopped time on the stage, but the effect lingered, reverberating through the audience, the judges, and the production crew. He stood there, slightly trembling, clutching his guitar, breathing heavily, not from exhaustion, but from the intensity of emotion that had poured out of him in the past few minutes. Sweat dotted his forehead, his heart pounded, and for a fleeting moment he felt almost unreal, as if he were watching himself from the outside. The applause continued, echoing in waves around the theater, but Ethan's focus remained on the boy in the front row. The young boy was still clutching his mother's hand, tears streaming freely, but his eyes sparkled with a light that Ethan had never seen before. It wasn't just joy, it was hope. In that moment, Ethan realized the full weight of what he had done. This performance wasn't for the judges, it wasn't for the cameras, it wasn't for fame. It was for him, the boy who had endured so much and had finally, if only for a moment, experienced pure, unfiltered happiness. Simon leaned forward, wiping at his eyes discreetly. "Ethan, I don't even know where to start," he said, his usual sharp, cutting tone softened by awe. That was more than a performance, that was a gift." Heidi nodded, her hands clasped as tears ran down her cheeks. "It's not just talent, it's heart, and that's something rare, something extraordinary." Howie, typically the comic relief, spoke quietly, his voice filled with sincerity. "I don't know if I've ever seen anything like that. You just changed the entire room." The audience had risen to their feet, and many were still crying, moved not by perfection, but by authenticity, by the raw humanity that had filled the room in a way that felt sacred. The boy's parents had rushed forward, carrying him gently onto the stage. Ethan knelt to meet him at eye level, offering a warm, steadying smile. "You were amazing," Ethan whispered. "This was for you." The boy looked up at him, his eyes wide, still shimmering with tears. "Thank you," he said softly, his voice small but determined. I've never felt this happy before." The judges watched silently, moved by the exchange, realizing that this performance had transcended the usual bounds of competition. It wasn't about winning or losing anymore. It was about the ripple effect of empathy, the power of a single act of kindness, and the capacity of music to connect people in ways words alone could not. And then it happened, the moment that would be remembered in AGT history. Simon, who was known for his rigorous standards and rarely moved by sentiment, reached for the golden buzzer. "For that," he said, his voice cracking slightly, "for the heart, the courage, and the kindness you've shown. You deserve this." He pressed the golden buzzer, and the stage erupted in an explosion of lights, confetti, and cheers. Ethan stood frozen for a moment, the reality of the moment sinking in. The golden buzzer wasn't just a ticket to the live shows. It was a symbol of recognition for something far bigger than talent alone. The audience roared in approval, many still crying, clapping, and cheering. Camera flashes lit up the stage, capturing not just a performance, but a moment of shared humanity. Heidi and Howie joined Simon, hugging Ethan, their faces wet with tears. "This is the reason we do this show," Heidi said softly. "Not for fame, not for ratings, but for moments like this." Ethan's hands shook slightly as he adjusted the guitar strap. He didn't speak immediately. He just nodded to the boy, who was now beaming from ear to ear. You made this possible," Ethan finally said, his voice trembling. "You gave me the courage to sing my heart. This moment is yours." The boy's mother stepped forward, tears streaming, and embraced Ethan. "You have no idea how much this means to him," she said. "He's been through so much, and today you gave him joy he's never known. Thank you." Even the production crew behind the cameras were affected. A cameraman quietly muttered, "I've worked on hundreds of auditions, and I've never felt anything like this." Another assistant whispered, "This isn't just a performance, it's a lesson in kindness." As the chaos of applause and excitement continued, Ethan's mind began to quiet, and he realized something profound: the power of selflessness. This performance had been about giving, not receiving. It had been about lifting someone else's spirits, shining a light in their life. And in doing so, he had created something far greater than personal success. It was a moment that would ripple outward, inspiring countless others. Social media was already erupting. Clips of the performance went viral instantly, with viewers around the country moved to tears. Comments poured in. "This is the kind of talent that restores faith in humanity. I've never seen kindness expressed so beautifully through music. This boy and Ethan just reminded me of what really matters." The impact was instantaneous, a digital echo of the real-world emotion that had filled the theater. Backstage, producers hurried to congratulate Ethan. "You didn't just perform, you created a story people will remember forever," one said. Another producer added, "We've never seen a golden buzzer moment like this." The judges were speechless. Everyone is talking about it. Ethan, still absorbing the whirlwind, simply nodded. The recognition was overwhelming, but the true reward was seeing the boy smile, watching him sing along quietly, witnessing his joy unfold in real time. The boy's parents invited Ethan to join them briefly in their seats, and for a few moments it felt like the stage, the lights, and the cameras had disappeared. Just a small circle of human connection, a shared heartbeat, a reminder of what mattered most. "You've made today unforgettable," the boy's father said, his voice choked. "Not just for him, but for all of us who needed to see that kindness still exists." Ethan nodded again, understanding the depth of what had happened. His choice to dedicate this performance to someone else, rather than focusing solely on impressing the judges, had created a transformative moment. It wasn't about him, it was about the impact he could have on others. That realization settled in his chest like a warm light, reminding him why he had started singing in the first place. As the audience slowly began to calm, and the confetti settled on the stage, Ethan took a final look at the boy. "Keep singing," he said softly. "Your voice matters, your story matters, never forget that." The boy smiled, nodding, clutching his mother's hand, and for a brief moment the world felt right, connected, hopeful, and alive with possibility. That night, clips of the performance trended nationwide. Talk shows, news outlets, and social media feeds were filled with reactions, not just about Ethan's talent, but about the humanity behind the act. People were inspired to reach out, to give, to perform small acts of kindness in their own lives. One simple choice to sing a song for someone else had become a catalyst for a wave of hope, joy, and generosity. And backstage, as Ethan finally sat down, letting his guitar rest beside him, he allowed himself a rare moment of reflection. He realized that success wasn't measured by applause, by judges' approval, or by the golden buzzer. Success was measured by the difference you made in someone else's life. And in that moment, he had succeeded beyond measure. The stage lights dimmed, the audience slowly filtered out, but the impact lingered. One act of kindness, one performance filled with heart, had transformed lives, on stage, in the audience, and across the nation. And Ethan knew, deep down, that this was only the beginning. The ripple he had started today would continue, spreading far beyond the confines of the theater, reminding everyone that even the smallest acts of generosity, courage, and compassion could create moments that change the world forever. Weeks had passed since that unforgettable audition, yet the world was still buzzing about Ethan's performance. Clips of him singing the Elvis song, eyes locked on the young boy in the audience, were shared across social media, news outlets, and talk shows. Millions had watched, many moved to tears by the simplicity and honesty of what had happened on that stage. And yet, for Ethan, the recognition was secondary. What mattered most was the boy whose life had been touched that day. The boy, named Jacob, had been discharged from the hospital, his condition slowly improving. But more importantly, something inside him had shifted. That single moment of being seen, being celebrated, and being included in a story far bigger than himself had ignited a spark of confidence and hope. He sang in his room, sometimes softly, sometimes loudly, letting the notes carry the weight of his newfound joy. His parents, overwhelmed with gratitude, would often watch him and say quietly to each other, "That boy's world changed because someone chose to care." Ethan, meanwhile, continued his journey on AGT. The golden buzzer had propelled him forward, and each week he performed on bigger stages, in front of larger audiences, and in front of judges who now seemed less like gatekeepers and more like witnesses to something rare. A performer using talent to inspire rather than to simply impress. But Ethan's approach remained the same. Each performance was heartfelt, genuine, and intentionally dedicated to someone in need. He carried the same humility, the same focus, the same purpose he had on that first date, proving that true artistry was inseparable from kindness and empathy. Backstage, judges and crew often remarked on the subtle shift he had brought to the show. AGT is usually about spectacle. Heidi said one afternoon during rehearsals, "But you've reminded us that the most impactful performances come from the heart." Simon nodded, a rare, approving smile on his face. "It's changed the standard," he admitted. "Talent alone isn't enough anymore. Heart, courage, empathy. That's what makes someone unforgettable." Even contestants who had once dismissed Ethan now spoke of him in reverent tones. "He reminded me why I started performing," one said. "It's not about winning or impressing anyone. It's about connecting, about making someone feel something real." Conversations backstage had shifted, with more performers seeking ways to use their talents to inspire or help others, as if Ethan's example had created a ripple of generosity that extended beyond the stage. Meanwhile, Jacob's story continued to circulate. Media outlets picked it up, interviewing his parents and sharing the clip of Ethan kneeling before the boy, encouraging him to sing along. The story spread, not just as a tale of talent, but as a lesson in human kindness. People everywhere were inspired to reach out, to help someone in need, to perform small acts of compassion. The hashtag #EthanForHope trended on social media, filled with stories of ordinary people doing extraordinary things for others. One day, Ethan received a letter in the mail. It was from Jacob, handwritten in careful, youthful letters. Inside was a note: "Dear Ethan, thank you for singing for me. That day made me feel brave and happy. I am singing every day now because of you. I hope I can make someone else feel like you made me feel. You are my hero. Love, Jacob." Ethan read the letter again and again, feeling tears well in his eyes. This simple piece of paper, a few lines of heartfelt words, reminded him why he had chosen this path. It wasn't the applause, the golden buzzer, or the fame. It was the moments like this, the lives touched, the hearts lifted, the courage inspired, that mattered most. Weeks turned into months. Ethan's performances continued to captivate audiences, but the true impact wasn't measured in ratings or ticket sales. It was measured in the stories people shared, the lives they touched, and the kindness they carried forward. Jacob's journey continued too. Encouraged by the experience, he began to write songs of his own, small melodies inspired by the joy and bravery he had witnessed. Each note he played was a tribute to the power of empathy, the ability of one person to make a difference, and the courage it took to share your heart with the world. Ethan's story, in turn, became a beacon for aspiring performers everywhere. Talent competitions, often criticized for focusing solely on spectacle, began to acknowledge the importance of intent and heart. Judges and audiences alike became more attuned to the emotional honesty behind each performance. And slowly, a culture began to emerge, one where music and art were celebrated not just for skill, but for their ability to inspire, heal, and connect people across differences. Back in the theater where it all began, the stage that had witnessed Ethan's historic performance remained a symbol. Crew members often spoke of that day as if it were sacred. You could feel the energy. One cameraman recalled, "It wasn't just music, it was something bigger, something human." And for Ethan, every time he returned to that stage, he carried with him the memory of Jacob's smile, the sound of the boy's small voice harmonizing with his own, and the knowledge that a single act of kindness had changed more than just a competition. It had changed lives. The show went on, and so did the world outside it. Viewers everywhere were inspired to take small, meaningful actions, calling a friend who needed encouragement, volunteering at hospitals, performing random acts of kindness, or simply listening to someone with empathy. Ethan's performance had created a ripple effect, a reminder that hope and compassion were contagious. One simple act, a song shared with heart, had grown into a wave of humanity. In the quiet moments away from cameras and applause, Ethan often reflected on the journey. He realized that true impact doesn't always come from grand gestures, but from moments of intention, honesty, and courage. His gift had been amplified not by fame or skill alone, but by the choice to act selflessly, to reach beyond himself and touch someone else. And in those reflections he found peace. He understood that while the judges, the cameras, and the audience had witnessed a remarkable performance, the real legacy wasn't the applause or recognition. It was the lives changed, the hearts opened, and the hope sparked in places that needed it most. The final scene of Ethan's journey on AGT, though unseen by cameras, was just as powerful. Sitting in his room with his guitar, he played softly, thinking of Jacob and every person inspired by the performance. The notes weren't just music, they were messages of courage, reminders that empathy matters, and proof that one person, one moment of generosity, can leave a mark on the world that lasts far longer than the spotlight. And so, the story ended not with a curtain call, but with a promise that kindness, courage, and compassion have the power to change lives. One song had reminded millions that we are all connected, that every act of love matters, and that even the smallest gesture can ignite hope that spreads far beyond what we can imagine. Ethan's voice had stopped time on that stage, but the legacy of that moment, hope, humanity, and heart, would continue forever.